The federal government just reopened the GM 6.2L investigation, and this time it's even worse than before. On January 16, 2026, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration launched a brand new probe into General Motors after receiving dozens of complaints about engines that catastrophically failed after getting the recall fix. That's right. Owners brought their trucks in, got the recall work done, drove away thinking they were safe, and then their engines exploded anyway. This is an absolute disaster for GM, and it raises a critical question that should terrify anyone who owns one of these vehicles. If the fix doesn't work, what are you supposed to do? And here's the part that should make your blood boil. Stick around because I'm going to show you exactly how GM's so-called solution is actually making things worse for some owners, costing them hundreds of dollars more every year while their engines are still ticking time bombs. Let's break down what's happening here. The original recall, campaign number 25V-274, was issued in April of 2025 and covered nearly 598,000 vehicles in the United States alone. We're talking about 2021 through 2024 Chevrolet Silverados 1500s, GMC Sierras 1500s, Cadillac Escalades, Chevy Tahoes and Suburbans, and GMC Yukons. All of them are equipped with the L87 6.2-liter V8. The problem? Manufacturing defects in the connecting rods and crankshafts. According to NHTSA documents, there were two primary root causes: rod bearing damage from sediment on the connecting rods and crankshaft oil galleries, and out-of-specification crankshaft dimensions with improper surface finish. Both issues were traced back to supplier manufacturing and quality problems. Now, when an engine with these defects fails, it doesn't gently sputter to a stop. We're talking about catastrophic bearing failures that can cause the engine to seize completely. Or, and this is the nightmare scenario, the connecting rod can punch straight through the engine block. And when this happens on the highway at 70 miles per hour, you lose all propulsion instantly. No power steering, reduced braking, just you coasting in traffic, hoping you can get to the shoulder before someone rear-ends you. But wait until you hear what GM's fix actually was. It's going to make you question whether they were even trying to solve this problem or just buying time. Stay with me. So here's what GM told dealerships to do when owners brought their trucks in for the recall. First, dealers would inspect the engine. If they found evidence of damage or failure, they'd replace the entire engine. That sounds reasonable, right? But here's where it gets sketchy. If the engine passed the inspection, meaning it hadn't failed yet but still had the defective parts, GM's solution was to drain out the factory OW20 oil and replace it with thicker OW40 synthetic oil. They'd also install a new oil cap, replace the oil filter, and stick an insert in the owner's manual explaining the change. That's it. That was the fix. Thicker oil. Now, I want you to think about this logically. If your engine has out-of-specification crankshaft dimensions and sediment contamination in critical oil passages, is switching to a thicker oil really going to solve that? Or is it just masking the symptoms while the underlying defect continues to eat away at your engine? The answer, according to 36 vehicle owners who filed complaints with NHTSA, is that it doesn't solve anything. These are owners who did everything right. They brought their vehicles in when they got the recall notice, they let the dealer inspect the engine passed, they got the oil change, and then, weeks or months later, their engines failed anyway. And here's the truly insidious part about this oil change fix. Not only does it not prevent engine failure, but it's actually costing owners more money every single day they drive. I'll explain why in just a minute, but first you need to understand just how widespread this problem really is. According to NHTSA's Office of Defects Investigation, they've received over 1,157 reports of engine bearing failures in vehicles equipped with the L87. Let me say that again, 1,157 reports. Now, GM initially claimed that only about 3% of the recalled vehicles were actually affected by this defect. 3% of 598,000 would be roughly 18,000 engines, but we're already seeing complaint numbers that suggest the problem is far more widespread than GM initially admitted. And it gets worse. Out of those 1,157 failure reports, 173 came from vehicles that were built outside the recall window. That means there are 2019 and 2020 model years Silverados and Sierras with the same defective engines, but they were never included in the recall. These owners are driving around with ticking time bombs under their hoods, and GM has offered them absolutely nothing. That's exactly why NHTSA opened a second, separate investigation back in October of 2025 to determine whether the recall needs to be expanded to include those earlier model years. But here's what prompted this brand new investigation that just opened on January 16, 2026. Post-remedy failures. The agency received 36 vehicle owner questionnaires from people whose engines failed after the recall work was completed. 36 might not sound like a huge number, but when you consider that GM only started performing the recall repairs in mid-2025 and were barely into 2026, that's an extremely alarming failure rate. And the federal government agrees. They're now investigating the adequacy of GM's remedy. Translation, they're questioning whether GM's fix actually works at all. Now, let me explain that hidden cost I mentioned earlier. When GM switches your engine to OW40 oil instead of OW20, that's not just a simple oil change. That thicker oil increases internal engine friction, and increased friction means reduced fuel efficiency. How much are we talking? Depending on driving conditions, owners could see anywhere from half a mile per gallon to 2 miles per gallon reduction in fuel efficiency. That might not sound like much, but let's do the math. If you drive 15,000 miles a year and your fuel efficiency drops by just 1 mile per gallon and you're getting around 16 miles per gallon combined in a full-size truck, that's an extra 58 gallons of fuel you're burning every single year. At current gas prices, that's several $100s in additional fuel costs, year after year for as long as you own the vehicle. And that's assuming the thicker oil actually prevents your engine failure, which, as we've seen from those 36 post-remedy failure reports, is absolutely not guaranteed. In fact, one of the class action lawsuits filed against GM specifically mentions this issue. The lawsuit states that owners are presented with two bad options: do nothing and risk catastrophic engine failure, or get the recall fix and pay hundreds of dollars more for gasoline while still risking engine failure. But wait until you hear what GM's fix actually was. It's going to make you question whether they were even trying to solve this problem or just buying time. Stay with me. So here's where this situation goes from bad to absolutely unconscionable. When dealers replace these engines under the recall, what do they replace them with? Well, according to GM's own technical bulletins, if the replacement engine was built before April 1, 2024, it could still have the same defects as the original engine. Think about that. You bring your truck in with a failed engine, they tear it apart, install a brand new engine, and that new engine might have been sitting in a warehouse somewhere built with the same defective parts that destroyed your first engine. And sure enough, there are documented cases of owners who had their engines replaced under warranty only for the replacement engine to fail months later. Then they get a second replacement engine, and in some cases, that one fails too. Can you imagine the frustration? You spent $60,000, $70,000, maybe $80,000 on a truck. The engine fails. You wait weeks, maybe months for a replacement. You get it back, it fails again. Another wait, another replacement. And through all of this, you're without your vehicle. You're dealing with rental car hassles, and you have absolutely zero confidence that the next engine won't fail too.
This is why NHTSA is now specifically investigating the adequacy of GM's remedy. They're looking at whether the inspection process is thorough enough, whether the oil change solution is effective, and whether the replacement engines GM is installing are actually any better than the ones they're replacing. So, if you own one of these vehicles, what should you be watching for? According to both NHTSA documents and owner reports, there are several warning signs that your engine might be on the verge of failure. First, listen for unusual noises. Owners report knocking, ticking, growling, or rumbling sounds, often described as coming from the bottom end of the engine. These are the sounds of bearing failure in progress. Second, watch your dashboard. A check engine light, especially combined with other symptoms, could indicate serious problems. Some owners also report performance issues like hesitation, high RPMs, abnormal shifting, or reduced power. But here's the truly terrifying part. According to NHTSA documents, many owners report no detectability before failure. Their engines seemed fine one moment, and the next moment, they experienced a complete loss of propulsion. No warning, no check engine light, just a sudden, catastrophic failure. That's what makes this such a serious safety issue. When your engine dies at highway speeds without warning, you're not just dealing with an expensive repair, you're dealing with a potential accident that could injure or kill you and everyone around you. And if you think this is just about older trucks, I've got news for you about 2025 and 2026 models that's going to shock you. Now, GM has stated that engines built after June 1st, 2024 are not affected by this defect. So, theoretically, if you bought a 2025 or 2026 model year truck and your engine was built after that date, you should be safe. But here's the problem. The investigation is still ongoing. NHTSA is still gathering data, and we're still seeing reports of engine failures in brand new trucks. The investigation documents specifically note that they're looking at the adequacy of the remedy and whether the root cause extends beyond what GM initially identified. What does that mean in plain English? It means federal investigators aren't convinced that GM has actually found and fixed the underlying problem. They're questioning whether there might be additional manufacturing defects or quality control issues that haven't been addressed. And until that investigation concludes, until NHTSA issues a final report stating that the problem is solved, anyone buying or owning a vehicle with a 6.2-liter L87 engine is taking a risk. This is why transparency matters. This is why federal oversight matters. Without owners filing complaints with NHTSA, without investigators like Steve Perry doing their jobs, GM could have swept this under the rug and left hundreds of thousands of people driving around in unsafe vehicles. So what's the bottom line? If you own a 2021 through 2024 GM truck or SUV with a 6.2-liter V8, check your VIN on the NHTSA website immediately. If there's an open recall, contact your dealer and get it addressed. But understand that the recall fix may not actually solve the problem. Keep detailed records of everything. Every service visit, every repair, every conversation with the dealer or GM customer service. If your engine fails after the recall remedy, you need that documentation for potential lemon law claims or class action participation. And if you're in the market for a new truck, maybe think twice before choosing the 6.2-liter. With over 1,100 complaints, multiple federal investigations, class action lawsuits, and now evidence that even the recall fix isn't working, this engine has become one of the biggest reliability disasters in recent automotive history. The silver lining? Your complaints are working. The federal government is taking action. GM is facing billions of dollars in potential costs. And eventually, that financial pressure will force them to actually solve this problem, instead of just slapping a Band-Aid on it with thicker oil. Keep filing those NHTSA complaints. Keep holding manufacturers accountable. That's how we create real change.